Class, how are you? It's Jeffrey again. Today we're talking about what we would do if we were flying and a component of our GPS started to malfunction. If we've had this situation happen to us and a potential scenario. So it wasn't necessarily a GPS failure that's ever happened to me. Honestly, I think those kind of circumstances are few and far between. But I did have a scenario when I was on my private pilot, one of my cross countries, my solo cross countries, where I was in an airplane that was unfamiliar to me, which I guess in hindsight was probably a bad idea. I had a moment of panic when I missed one of my waypoints that I was using in my flight plan, and didn't really know what to do. So it wasn't a GPS failure, but it was GPS related nonetheless, because I was using that as my primary source of guidance, other than what I later learned was just pilotage. But we'll get into that in just a second. The big thing is, like John and Martha King say, it's fly the airplane, right? So you have a malfunction with your GPS. The first thing you need to do is just continue to fly the airplane. GPS is not a primary flight control or anything like that, so the airplane's still rocking and rolling just fine. Then you need to assess the situation. So what is it that caused the GPS to fail? Was it an MFD failure? Was it did you not have RAM capabilities? Did WASP fail? What is the failure exactly? And then you need to decide what to do with that failure. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, you need to do it. That's an acronym that John and Martha King used, the FAD, right? I think the FAA likes to use the DECIDE model. So detect the problem, evaluate the necessity to counteract this issue, choose a successful ending to the flight, identify the possible solutions, do one of those solutions, and then evaluate its effectiveness. So no matter which solution you choose to use in a situation like a GPS failure, the big thing is just continue to fly the airplane. If it's your WAS system that failed or your wide area augmentation system, that's not a huge deal. The GPS and the Garmin G1000 will revert to the classic mode. Not all G1000s are WAS capable, and that's just going to give you a little bit of wider tolerances. In your en route phase of flight in a classic G1000 without WAS capability, you're just going to have a 5 nautical mile deviation on your CDI, as opposed to your WAS, which is just 2 nautical miles. And then terminal mode, approach mode, and the missed approach mode are all still 0.3. 1 nautical mile, and then 0.3 in the approach and missed approach mode. Now, WAS does give you a 2 degree in the approach, so whichever one's more narrow is what the WAS is going to choose. So the tolerance are not as great. The other thing is, if you're an IFR, you're not going to be shooting a WAS approach. You might be limited to a non-precision approach or some other type of approach like an ILS, which doesn't use your GPS. In non-IFR conditions, this is really much less of an issue. Good flight planning and things like that really prevent the need for a GPS system altogether. Now, GPS helps in the background. It helps reduce your workload for sure, but it's not a necessary piece of equipment for flying in VFR conditions. What are some other ways you can continue to fly and navigate? To me, the easiest one is just pilotage. So I gave you a scenario that I was in where it's not that my GPS failed, it just I failed to learn my GPS system. And I was lost for about 30 seconds until I realized if I just looked down, I would notice exactly where I was and how to get back to my home airport. And that's exactly what I did. I looked down, kind of looked around me, and that's called pilotage. You just look around and find something familiar to you and start working your way back to your destination. Another thing you can do, and this is both VFR and IFR flying, is start dialing up some VORs. Use cross radials to determine where you are. Use a VOR to determine, navigate to it and pick a way to navigate away from it back to your destination. These are all easy things you can do, VFR or IFR if you wanted to. The other one's dead reckoning, just knowing time and distance measurements. You do this normally in your flight planning. You do a wind correction or wind calculation, and you know where you are based off, when you cross each waypoint. And another thing that is not as talked about, but is still something that's an option to you, because when stuff starts failing, don't give up at just what's available. But you also have your unapproved GPS sources. Pull out your phone, pull out your ForeFlight, something like that might have GPS, and that could help tell you where you are in the world and help you navigate back. So don't neglect to use some of these other resources, right? Be resourceful. And if all else fails, if you are completely lost and GPS is not helping, declare your situation to ATC. I wouldn't say it's necessarily an emergency at this point, just because GPS failed, but get on frequency, maybe 121.5 if you're not on with a flight following or something like that, and just say, hey, this is what I got going on. Can you help me out? They'll probably give you a squawk code. They might ask you to identify it and maybe try to get you to pick out a reference point that they can use to help locate you. And then, whether you're in VFR or IFR conditions, they can vector you around. They can give you assistance, try to get you to somewhere that you do know or to your destination. So just because GPS fails or something like that doesn't mean, you give up on your flight and all else is a loss. Just keep flying the airplane, aviate, navigate, communicate, and all will work out well for you. GPS is a nice system to have, but it's certainly not be-all, end-all for navigation. We as pilots have been flying for a lot longer than GPS has been around. Maybe not each one of us individually, but I'm certain that other pilots have not had GPS, and it wasn't even that long ago. So keep flying, keep doing what you got to do, and you'll make it to your destination safely. I hope you liked the video. Look forward to seeing your guys' stuff, and congratulations on making it this far in class. I'll see you guys at the end.